Hello everybody and welcome to Mr. Sutton's computer science class. Today we're going to continue our discussion about CSS, which as you'll remember from last time means cascading style sheets. When HTML was first created, it was never even a conception that websites would need design, that they would just need function and content, and there was no thought at all about how the page would look. So the topic today is really about the boxes and what the boxes can do, and what the designer can do to change the look of the boxes. There are 5 parts of the box, and I'm going to put up some images and we'll talk about each of those 5 different parts and how we can affect them as designers by using CSS code. So let's begin. Alright, so what I'm doing right now is I'm working on my Mac. I have a web page that I designed in HTML and with some CSS formatting on it. That's in my Safari browser, and I have down at the bottom here the HTML and CSS code, and we'll be referring to that throughout the lesson. That was created and written, by the way, in TextEdit, which is a free program that comes with Mac. It's similar to WordPad on a PC. So let's take a look at what we have here. The name of the page that I created is using boxes for design in CSS, and what are the names of the parts of the box you can design. And this is pretty much a vocabulary lesson, but we're going to look at the code as well. So here we are. We have 5 parts to each box. The first part is called content. Content is the area where the actual text that you want to show is going. So you create a paragraph of text, and what will happen is, if we just created it in the HTML, it would just sit on that section of the page on the orange background. But what I did to be able to see exactly the space where that content goes and fills, what I did was I added some CSS so that you can see that. So let's take a look at that now. It's this top section in the CSS that I'm referring to. So when we're looking at that section, what we can see here is there are a couple of things. We're in the head section of the HTML. You should remember from our HTML class. We have a doc type, which is HTML. And once we open up the head, I gave it a title. The title, again, just as a refresher, is what goes in the tab. So I call that CSS boxes. The tab in your browser will open up with that title. And what I have right below that then is something called style type equals text/CSS. So this is internal CSS. It's not a very complex one. It's very simple actually. And what I did was I knew that I wanted all my boxes that surround the content to be blue. And I wanted you to see how those boxes will change. So what I did was I created a paragraph selector. It's going to select everything that has the paragraph tag. So that's the letter P. So the paragraph tag you can see down here, it looks like the letter P with the opening and closing brackets. So anything that is inside a letter P bracket is going to have, this is how you write the CSS code, it's going to have an opening curly bracket. On the next line, it's going to say what the property that we're going to change and what the value is. We have background color, colon. So the background color, not for the whole document, but in my boxes, in the paragraphs, is going to be this 00CCFF, which is kind of a light blue. And then I close that bracket. Very important, after I put the hexadecimal code, I could have also used RGB, or I could have used a color word for a web-safe color. You always have to have that semicolon at the end of each value to close it off. So I got background color is that blue color that you see. And then I close the curly bracket, and then close this, in HTML I close the style. So this section right here is my entire internal CSS. The reason I did that one as an internal CSS is I didn't want to repeat that in each and every one of the other paragraphs. So now each and every paragraph is going to be inside a blue colored box. Let's move to the next section, which is the border section. I want you to think of the border like a fence around a property. If we have 2 properties, your house and your neighbor's house, and you put a fence right exactly where the property line is, that would be the same thing as a border. So a border goes around the outside of the CSS box. So what you're seeing now in that border section is a black line. I could change the color of the line, I could change it to a dotted line, I could do a few other things. But right now it's a solid black line that goes all the way around that blue box. It doesn't change the blue box in any way. it is considered part of the box. It is that very outside edge of the box. So let's take a look and see how we put that in there. So what we have now in the body section is, here's our border heading, and here's the style. I separated it out from the rest, so the paragraph style, so we could see it better. It says P for paragraph, style equals, border hyphen style, colon, solid, meaning I wanted a solid line there, and the semicolon. And because we're inside an HTML tag, we still need the equal sign here, and we need the quotation marks at the beginning and end, as we do when we're coding in HTML. All right, if we were just in CSS up here, when we were looking up in this section, I did not use those. So if it's inside a tag like it is up here, you need the equal sign and the quotation marks. And if we're using selectors in CSS, then it's the name of the thing that's being selected and the property and the value. After the property is a colon, after the value is a semicolon. Just a reminder there. Okay, so let's get back to that border. So we got paragraph style equals border style solid. And when we look at that, that has a solid line around the border. I didn't give it any other directions. Let's take a look and see what happens if we change that word solid to something different. So I'm going to type in the word dotted, and I'm going to hit Command S. If you are on a PC, you would do Control S, and that would save it. And now when I bring that out of here, what I should see is that the nature of that line around the border changes to a dotted line instead of a solid line. So on that particular border, I could use dashes, I could use other things as well. There are a lot of border styles that you can use. But for now, I just wanted to show you how that border property works in CSS and how we can make adjustments. So now we're working on padding. Padding is the section of the box that comes in between the content and the border. So you notice how in the above boxes, the content is really squished up to the edges, right all the way aligned with the edge of the box, and at the top and at the bottom as well. And there really is no space. It makes it very hard to read the edges, especially if you have a fancy border around it. So what you sometimes want to do is you want to give yourself some padding. I put quite a lot to emphasize what the padding should look like here. So it's this space. It changes the dynamic of the box quite a bit. What I have now is I have a solid border. I have a padding, which is 50 pixels. So here's the code we're talking about. Paragraph style equals padding, 50 pixels. Border style is solid. So I left a solid border. You have two quotation marks. I want to take that out. What we have now is we have this really big amount of padding. Let's say I wanted to make that less because it's really kind of huge. So what I could do is I could change the 50 pixels here. Let's make it 25 pixels instead. And you see I still have padding around it, but it's much smaller. I could also have made the padding in different parts bigger or smaller. I don't have to put an even amount of padding all the way around. If I wanted to squish the text over this way, I would put larger padding on the left side. And I'll show you how to do that later in one of the other parts of the web page. So the next part that we're going to talk about is the outline. We might think outline and border are the same thing because we kind of use them interchangeably. If we're drawing a picture and we do an external contour line, we sometimes call that the outline around the character that we're drawing or the house or whatever we're drawing. But really, that's the border. It's part of. Where the outline is, think of it as a picture frame. The picture frame is not a part of the painting. Rather, it's something that extends beyond for a certain size. So let's take a look. This red area that I created here is the outline. So it is not part of the box, but it does go into the CSS along with all the other considerations that we make for boxes. All right, so let's take a look at that. So here we have another inline CSS. It's inline because I only wanted to affect that one paragraph. All right, so let's take a look. We've got P for paragraph, style equals padding, 15 pixels. So it's got an even 15 pixel pad all the way around it. Border style is solid. And now here's where the outline parts of the tag go. I put 3 different properties of outline. I have an outline style, which is solid. I have an outline color, and I gave it a hexadecimal code. And again, I could have used RGB color here. I could have used a word, but I tend to use the hexadecimal numbers for the WebSafe colors. And then in outline, I gave it a width. So the width is wider than the padding. So out here, I have a frame that's wider than the space between the content and the box. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here I have a border all the way around. It should be 15 pixels in each direction. I made it red so that you can see it show up. It is completely outside the border. It's not part of the border. The outline goes around the border like a picture frame, and the padding is inside. Finally, the last thing that we're looking at is margin. So we have a margin. I made a thinner outline and I made it white instead of red. The border is still a black border. The content is still where it is with the blue box around it, and the padding is the same size as it was in this previous box. So let's take a look and see what that CSS looks like. So this is what we're looking at over here. Because I incorporated all the other things, this is getting longer and longer, this paragraph tag. The first part here is the padding. Then I have the border style again. And all that outline stuff, those 3 outline properties that I defined. But now I have added the margin. And here's where I put different values for the top, left, bottom, and right. Margin is the space outside the outline or outside the box if there is no outline. And it's the space between 2 paragraphs. So what we're going to do is we're going to be able to make paragraphs closer together, farther apart, move them left and right a little bit using the margin properties. I could make an even margin all the way around, but what I've done is I've made one that's 30 pixels on the top, 75 pixels on the right, 150 pixels on the left, and 200 pixels on the bottom. Let's take a look at that, and I'm going to change those numbers to show you how that changes the margin a bit. All right. Right now, you can see that my whole box is sorted to the right of the center, and that's because my left margin is wider than my right margin. If I made those even, that would center the box. So that's another way to center a whole box, is by making the left and right margins even. So let's change a couple of these and see what happens. So if I change the value on the top, let's give it, instead of 30 pixels, let's give it 100 pixels. And I'm going to go Command S to save, and let's refresh my browser. And you see it moved down farther away from the margin headline there. So that's kind of far away. It makes it almost look like this word margin is more connected to this box than that. So I want to move it closer. So let's bring that back from 100 to, let's move it to 10. And I'm going to go Command S to save that. And let's move that out of the way and refresh. And when I refresh, that's going to move that closer so that this heading here is attached to that box a little better. All right, that's a design decision that you're probably going to want to make. All right, let's change some of the other values. Again, that was the top value. Let's look at the next one. So here we have 75 pixels. I said I believe that that one was the right margin. So let's change that margin and see how that affects where the box is moved and placed. All right, so let's make that 200, and I'm going to go Command S to save. And again, look at the spacing here, because this is what's going to change, and let's see how it affects the box. Refresh here, and you see that that margin here on the right side changed. The box is a little more centered. It's not quite centered because I believe this one is 150 and this is 200, but it's a little bit more centered. What it could do is it could push the content down to another line. So if I really squish the edges of this box in, I would have it on another line. Let's do the next one. So the third number, the third value, is set for 150 pixels. That's actually the space between the bottom of the box and the next thing, which is a horizontal line. If we look over here, you see this horizontal line? So this is 150 pixels, is the spacing in between those. What I want to do is I want to change that amount of space. That's a lot of space but below that. So let's change that to 50 pixels. I'm going to save. And when I refresh, you'll see that the box and the horizontal line are moving a lot closer together. And finally, the left side of the box is set for 200 pixels. Let's go really, really big and see what that does. 500 pixels. Ooh, that's going to be huge. Let's save, and when we refresh, that really squished that left side in and moved the box over. It also pushed this down to a new line, which made the box a little taller. But it did not change this space here, or this space up here, or this space over here, just the side on the left. All right, so if you're designing a page, knowing what areas of the content that you're putting in there and controlling those areas will really help you design the page to be the way you want it to look. In HTML, we didn't have this kind of control, and it was a lot harder to make those kind of formats. So I want you to think about how you would use it. I want you to go to the HTML page that you've been working on and practice putting in some of that inline CSS. I'm going to create a document that will give you some hints for, or directions for, using all of those, and see how you can change the design of your page using boxes. So that's your assignment for today, is to open up your HTML page and work on adding some of those different box parts and the parts that are just outside the box. The parts inside the box are the content, the border, and the padding in between the border and the content. And the parts that are outside are your outline and your margin. All right, so I want you to work on your design of your HTML pages that you started in the past. Have a great day, everybody.